Life is about events. It's about challenges met and overcome or not. It's about successes and failures. But more than all of these put together, it's about how we touch and are touched by the people we meet. It's all about the people. Welcome to the Retirement Answer Man Show. My name is Roger Whitney. I am your host. I'm excited you're here with me. Now, if you're new to the show, this show is dedicated to helping you not just figure out the business side of retirement so you can survive retirement. It's about helping you have the confidence to actually lean in and rock retirement. Now, there's a very big difference there. There's a lot more to the finances for sure. We want to cover both ends. Now, in today's show, we're going to bring on Nicole Rockstar Mills to hang out with me. And we have a grand old time, by the way. We haven't chatted on the show for a while to answer your questions. We're going to do that again in October for the whole month. Now, a little bit of a disclaimer here. I answer a question around advisory services, hiring a retirement planner. And I think I brought out a little bit of a soapbox and really went to town on my thoughts on that. Sorry if that went on a little bit. I didn't mean to bring out the soapbox, but I'm passionate about things. And evidently that day today, or when I recorded it, was about 2 days ago, I was passionate about that. So with that, let's get on with the show. Today's show is sponsored by the Rock Retirement Club, our online platform that will equip you to develop your plan with world-class retirement planning software and empower you through our team of coaches and a vibrant community to actually lean in and rock retirement. Open enrollment starts end of October. We're going to have some online open houses we're going to announce, so you can go to rockretirementclub.com to learn more and sign up for updates. Now, before we bring Nicole on, I want to let you know about a resource that we created, the entire team created, to help you think strategically about inflation during retirement. It's a short white paper that you can get at doretirementright.com. So if you're worried about inflation and wondering how you should approach this subject, go to doretirementright.com and you can grab a resource to help you navigate this well. Let's have a chat with Nicole. All right, we're going to answer some of your listener questions. If you have a question for the show, you go to rogerwhitney.com/Ask Roger, and you can type in your question, or we do have a fastpass option, and that is to leave an audio question. We try to elevate those. All right, so to help answer your questions, we have Rockstar Nicole Mills joining us. It's been a long time, Nicole.
It has, and I feel like I should disclaimer, I'm probably going to help read the questions. I don't know how much I'll be answering.
Well, you probably picked up something over the 6 or so years.
Picked up a tip or two over time, yes.
Right. You know, I was thinking the other day, Nicole, as I was doing my calendar for October, is that Boss's Day is in October. And I know you remember that, but you did have 1 year that you forgot that. So I just wanted to put that on your radar. Okay.
To make sure I remember. Okay. Well, do you have any special requests for Boss's Day this year?
Well, I told you. We were talking. I came across this.
I can't send that Johnny Cash picture in 6 Shot Saturday.
No, it's an iconic Johnny Cash photo where he's, giving the bird. And I don't know, I saw it the other day. I'm like, that's just a cool photo. I actually made it my home screen, which is, I wouldn't recommend that to people. Not for a while, just because I thought that was a cool photo. I don't know why I like Johnny Cash.
Your kids are out of the house. It's fine.
Yeah. I like his music, but I mean, he was not like the best person, but that's a whole nother discussion. Anyway, let's get on to some questions. Now, before we get started, Nicole, I thought I'd bring up a topic that I actually had with a client a few weeks ago. And this person moved to a planned community, like the Village is a planned 55 and older community. And they're having the time of their life. They're loving it. It just fits them, the bike pass, the activities, the clubs. and the fact that everybody is so open to making friends. So I imagine you experienced that obviously in college. Remember that? Going to college, everybody's sort of new and in the same boat. Probably new parents, right? You have kids that have play dates. Everybody's sort of, okay, we'll make some friends and common activities. Now, at your stage with kids in school and you're crazy busy running the show, how easy is it to make friends and have people, hey, you want to have coffee? Is that pretty easy?
Oh, I feel like I have a lot of acquaintances, people I see at school drop off or sports practice or church. I know, first name basis, but not any new, like deeper type friendships.
Okay. Well, and the conversation with this client sort of relates to this because when you move to a 55 and older community, everybody's sort of in the same boat, right? They are looking to make friends because they're transplants from somewhere else. But during this conversation, this particular person is single, and they were communicating that as a single person, it's a little bit harder to get included in invitations because everybody is couple oriented.
I can see that.
Yeah, I can see that. And then the other point that this person pointed out that I really liked was I generally can make friends easily if I want to. Well, let me rephrase. I can put myself out there easily if I want to. Generally, I'm pretty reserved. I'll sit in the coffee shop with my headphones on and everything else. But if I want to be friendly, I can do it. Now, whether it gets received or not, who knows? Some people are a lot more shy.
That's true.
And you can imagine if you're single, moving to a new area, and you're sort of shy, it's easy not to put yourself out there and not to have people make offers to join because you're if three couples are going somewhere, asking the single person might feel a little uncomfortable. I don't know. But this was the experience that they were communicating to me. So I guess I just wanted to put that out there for people to noodle on and put that out there and keep it top of mind. So if you live in a community and you're looking to make friends, think of the people that might be a little bit more reserved, or maybe they're single, and maybe make a little effort to include them and invite them. That's all I wanted to say about that.
What about the single people? I feel like maybe our listeners could share some strategies. Like if you are shy and you are single, like what are some things that work for you?
That's a great question. So if you hit reply to Six Shot Saturday and you can share your thoughts, you can put them in the Ask Roger page on rogerwhitney.com too. And maybe we'll share some of those in the future. But yeah, definitely. That's a great idea. Thanks for mentioning that. The next thing before we get to specific questions, Nicole, is I've had 3 people ask me in the last 4 days, should I really keep this international position? Why do I own international equities? And they've done poorly, like all equity markets, a little bit more poorly than U.S. markets. And they're, maybe it's reading the papers and thinking, international, the world is in trouble. Maybe we should have more money just in the U.S. And so I just wanted to give my thoughts on that, because if I get 3 people asking me that question, that's probably on more people's minds.
Hot topic.
Yeah. Traditionally in investment management, and I've seen the charts and heard the presentations more than I would ever want to about the value of international diversification. And generally it's positioned as it's a asset class that gives you more diversification against U.S. markets, and it's not as highly correlated, meaning it moves a little bit differently, and there's value to that from an asset allocation standpoint. That may be true statistically. In my experience, what ends up happening is usually when you need the diversification most, it goes away. So what I mean by that, Nicole, is correlation means how something moves relative to something else. Do they move together in lockstep, or do they move opposite, or somewhere in between? And usually during the most stressful economic times, everything correlates to one, meaning they move together. So right when you need the diversification, they don't actually give it to you, especially with risk assets. And so I never really got into all of those presentations, and I didn't really buy into it as much as the numbers said. But my argument would be why we want to keep international positions is not so much about the diversification part of it, but a lot of great companies aren't domiciled in the U.S. Some of the best companies in the world: Toyota, Mercedes, Novartis, Glaxo. IKEA. Is that a great company? I don't know. I've never really been. I don't know if I've been in an IKEA store.
You've never been to IKEA?
I don't know if I have. I don't think so.
There's one not far from me. The next time you're in Austin, we're going on a field trip.
Okay. Which I'll be in Austin in a couple of weeks, by the way, in your area. I was going to tell you about that.
IKEA time.
Yeah. We can spend 20 hours putting something together. Is that how that works?
It is better for people that are good at patiently reading and following instructions. Okay. So if that's not you, then IKEA would be bad.
Do you think that's me, Nicole?
Let's move on.
Okay. So my value to diversification is not, or international position is not about some uncorrelated asset class. It's about just having a bigger menu of options in owning the best companies in the world. Because the reality is that almost all companies of mid-cap or above are international world companies, meaning they derive their revenue from all parts of the world or many parts of the world. And virtually all mid to large cap companies derive a lot of their revenue from the United States of America. So why would we not want to own IKEA or Glaxo or Novartis or Mercedes or Toyota? So that's my logic around that. Now, one issue with owning international companies is you have the currency, and the dollar's been extremely strong, which hurts international companies, but all that stuff works out. So that's my logic about why we have international. It's just to have more great companies in the portfolio. That's all. Okay. Hopefully I answered my thoughts on that anyway. And we have some listener questions. Nicole?
Our first question is an audio question from Teresa.
Hi, Roger. Thanks so much for your show. I listen to it a lot on my dog walks. I have a question for you about contributing to a company 401k. I'm 65 years old. My husband is 60. We're both still working and have a combined gross income of around $280,000 a year. My current 401k balance is $3.1 million, and my husband is around $800,000. I have a Roth with $300,000, a brokerage with around $600,000, cash and investments of about $350,000, and our house is paid for, so we don't have any debt. I plan on working another 2 years because I do like the work and the structure it gives me. I plan to do some Roth conversions between retirement age of 67 and my RMD age. I'm a bit nervous about the RMDs down the road, so currently I contribute about $27,000 a year to my employer's 401k Roth option. What would be your suggestion or feedback on if this contribution should be to a qualified 401k with the tax deduction now, or should I just go ahead and continue and pay the 24% earned income tax on the contributions?
Well, that's a great question, Teresa. And by the way, if you're going to mention a dog, which I love that you listen to the show while you walk your dog, I would always love to know the name of the dog and the breed of the dog, because I'm a big fan of dogs. And if Nicole's on the show, she would like to know if you walk your cat. I think people do that. So my short answer, Teresa, is I would continue to contribute to the Roth 401k rather than the pre-tax, even if you're in the 24% tax bracket. A couple of reasons. One is, you gave some financial background. It sounds like you can afford the tax, and it sounds like you likely have a plan that is fairly well funded in terms of paying for you and your husband once you both stop retirement. And the other reason is that I just did some back of the napkin calculations on even if you didn't do any other contributions to your pre-tax 401k assets. And let's say you got a 6% return between now and age 72. You're going to have roughly $170,000 a year in required minimum distributions. And then when your husband's RMDs kick in, that could grow to over $200,000 in our required minimum distributions, just with the pre-tax assets that you have. And so any contributions to pre-tax assets are going to exacerbate that situation and just add to the amount that you'll have to take out later on. Whereas the bird in the hand is I can contribute to a Roth 401k today, pay the 24% tax on that contribution. That money will grow tax-free forever, and I won't have required minimum distributions when we get over age 72. And I can afford to pay the tax. You can afford to pay the tax, it sounds like, from your income. So I would probably lean towards doing the Roth option rather than doing the pre-tax option. Now, I'll use myself as an example. I'm a lot younger, but I'm in the highest tax bracket and I'm doing Roth contributions, not because I like paying that much tax, but I can afford it right now because I'm working and it's building a bucket for the future so I don't have as much of a required minimum distribution problem later on.
All right. Well, our next question is from a listener, is actually an RRC member. They said, I'm 58 and I recently joined the
I'm sorry. RRC. I'm sorry.
I'm using the new software. It does a great job of aggregating my holdings and showing diversification and risk, etc. I was a CPA. I have a master's in taxation and was a venture firm CFO for over 20 years. So I enjoy running my own numbers as well as using advisors. Ooh, that's a smart person. My wife and I have been very fortunate and have accumulated sufficient assets to retire. We're working with advisors and putting the final touches on our plan, which we'll update as we go forward. Given the fee structure of the advisory industry, and even though we have enough assets to get to the lowest rate of fees in each of their structures, my single greatest expense per year, aside from Uncle Sam, will be our investment advisors. At my core, I'm frugal, and while I'm okay with this for a while, year after year, if I'm on plan, gives me pause. We have strong legal and tax advice, and those advisors are equally good in their profession and bill at an hourly rate. Do you have any thoughts on this? Thanks and good work. I look forward to the podcast, and I hope to use the club a bit more.
This is a really important question. I think let's think about this logically. First off, we need to understand that the financial and retirement advice industry is in the early mid innings of a transition from a sales industry to a professional advice industry. And compensation wise, the majority model by far is assets under management for advice. And generally that advice is focused more on portfolio management than it is on everything else, because that's how most advisors were trained, why they got into the business in the first place and how they were trained and what they like talking about. Market forecasts, economic forecasts, asset allocation, rebalancing. And so a lot of their value proposition is based off of the portfolio, and the assets under management structure. Its origins come from the switch from commissions, and it's a fantastic model from a repeatable revenue standpoint. So the major firms, that's one reason why they adopted it, and that's where we are today. Now, when you have substantial assets like you're talking about, and with no cap on those fees, that number can become an eye-popping number. And then the obvious question is, okay, these guys are great, or these gals are great, but are they worth that much money for what they're doing? And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, most likely not when you get to that level. Now, I don't know these specific advisors. There are definitely advisors that add a ton of money, but at some point, there needs to be some rationalization to how advisors are paid. Now, I say that, and Nicole cringed a little bit, but I think my experience is the majority of advisors focused 100% on the investment assets and give a lot lower resolution or lip service to actual retirement or financial planning. Now, I'm saying that is the norm in my experience, but there are obvious exceptions where there is a competent advisors that go a lot deeper into actual coaching and almost life coaching and being the project manager for coordinating between all these other advisors. And I think a financial advisor, a good financial advisor, is the best positioned to be able to do that. Now, the other part of this, when we're talking about paying substantial amount of money, is that, in my experience anyway, because hey, this is what I do, right? Right now, we have an assets under management model, is the return that you get from a good planner is asymmetrical most of the time. So the return that you're going to get from a planner is going to be one, project management. They're going to have a process that is systematic and checklists that they do consistently over time. And that process is meant to improve the consistency of quality decision making, right? So that is something that you, in any one decision, doesn't feel like it's adding a ton of value, but the cumulative effect of that can be substantial. And then you're going to have, obviously, the behavioral parts that come into helping people not make bad decisions. If you can avoid really bad decisions, that has a huge value, but it's not something you can calculate on an annual basis. So outside of the project management part of the value of a really good planner is going to be those moments when you have higher stakes decisions that you have to work through, and having someone that has the relational currency and is the project manager, you can get to work on making quality decisions very quickly because you have so much relational currency built up. And one decision that is very high stakes that they help you make, maybe it's a perspective, a different way of thinking of it, a resource that you didn't have, that's an asymmetrical return that could pay for years of advice. The problem is that from an industry perspective, nobody is really trained in that, or very, very few are trained in actually being a project manager, being a holistic coach, and having enough breadth of experience doing this, because they are all brought up to focus on investment management, what the firm is saying, and the soapbox of get more assets. Especially with major firms, the structure of the incentive package, and Charlie Munger, I think, was the one that said, always follow the incentives, is asset accumulation. You go get the client, manage the relationship, turn everything over to us, and our team and our experts will talk about markets and asset allocation. So if you're just paying for investment management and asset allocation, it's definitely not worth the money. If you find someone that is doing a lot of things that I'm talking about, then it's worth money. Then it becomes, how much money is it worth? And I know clients that are paying hundreds of thousands of dollars. Not my clients, are paying hundreds of thousands of dollars in advisory fees. We're really not getting that much other than, the song and dance. So I think there is a cap on what it should be. If it's your biggest expense beyond Uncle Sam, that's something to look at.
Big.
Yeah. The key is look at it with fresh eyes and then look at where alternatives are and compare, because it's easy to get stuck in just what is. And it sounds like you're looking at this with a little bit of fresh eyes. Now, I want to pivot. I feel like I got a soapbox out here, Nicole. Do I have a soapbox on? Am I standing on the soapbox?
You have a little bit of a soapbox, yes.
Okay. Well, let's just finish my soapbox and then we'll go on. So you mentioned that you were a club member, a Rock Retirement Club member. And part of the solution is, one, you can do it on your own, right? And I think obviously you're more than capable of doing this on your own. Or if you work with an advisor, it's your duty, and I think to be a better client, so you extract the value that you're paying for. The club is meant to help both of those people. And we added new software, we added professional grade retirement planning software. It's the most adopted retirement planning software by advisors. So this is what I use in my practice. And now RRC members like you have access to this. And then in January, coming out with guided agile retirement management to coach people through having their own quarterly meetings to make adjustments. So a lot of this is designed to show this is what Roger anyway thinks is a good job and what should be being done, and from a project management standpoint. So I do think that this is going to potentially equip you. My goal is anyway, that this is going to equip you to say, hey, if I want to do this on this own, I won't get specific advice, but by using the software and going through the course and having guided agile retirement management coach me every quarter, I have a process and support to help me make these decisions. That's the vision of the club. And I think that will help you. And it'll also help you compare, am I getting enough value relative to what I'm paying with this advisory team? Okay, I will put that soapbox away.
Okay.
I told Nicole
Your
not to let
next
me
question
ramble. Hopefully
is,
I didn't.
do I need to get like a timer or something or a
Well,
horn
it's
just
a
to beep you
messy
off?
subject, right? And
It is for sure.
I just have been in this industry for so long that I don't think enough of us are dancing for our dinner. And that's the question. Am I dancing for my dinner? Am I earning my value? And I think that's an important question. And clients, I think by inertia, sometimes fail to ask that question of their advisors.
Well, so you're an advisor. I mean, if he told his advisor, I think I want to try this on my own for a few years, and that doesn't burn any bridges, right? Like you could easily come back.
I would imagine. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know the advisor.
All right. Well, our next question is a basis question. So completely changing subjects here. Brian needs help with determining the basis in his rollover IRA. He says, I chose to roll over funds from my 401k to a Vanguard rollover IRA because of my work's limited investment choices in my 401k. I found the 1099-R from 2015, but most of my rollover was performed prior to 2015. I tried contacting the current 401k custodian and the previous 401k custodian. They didn't have any information and the records were not available. I tried my work's payroll to see if they had payroll information, and they don't. My company's payroll recommended contacting the IRS. I contacted the IRS and they sent me a transcript of my taxes for the past 10 years and said I should submit a form 4506T for older returns. I submitted the form 4 months ago and I haven't received anything back. Is form 4506T the correct form? Any tricks to fill it out correctly? And maybe I didn't fill it out correctly, and that's why I haven't received anything back.
Talk about a pivot on questions.
That is.
All right.
That's a wild goose chase if I've ever heard one.
The good news here is I have no soapbox on this answer. So if you're trying to determine your basis for your IRA or your 401k assets, likely you maybe have some after-tax contribution. So one, you're on the right track, Brian. The 4506-T is the right form. And not hearing back from the IRS is very normal. So their backlog is months. And with something like this, they just may never respond back to you. So the good thing is you've done the paperwork, you've submitted it. The typical turnaround in 2020 from some research that we did is about 4 to 6 weeks, but you may never hear from them. We have a link to an article, I think, from the IRS newsroom in 2022. We'll put a link to that in 6 Shot Saturday regarding this. I know it's a very specific one, but we want to make sure you can get it. So just keep lots of forms and a log of conversations, because ultimately, if any of this becomes an issue as you report this stuff, your paperwork and documentation will become very valuable because it becomes a negotiation, say, in the extent of an audit. If they see you have all your paperwork, they're going to be much more accommodating in working with you. So you're on the right track, buddy, even though I know it's frustrating.
Our next question is an audio question.
Oh, all right.
Good afternoon, Roger. I just have a question with regards to 401ks. What actually happens to the money when it goes down due to inflation or some change in the market? Where does it go? Thank you.
Robin, that's actually a really good question. And I was telling Nicole beforehand that it's a very simple question. It's an obvious question to ask. So I'm glad that you asked it, but it's actually a very difficult question to answer. So let's talk about two things. You mentioned what happens if inflation is going up and we talk about the loss of the value of our assets. Where does that money go? So we'll talk about inflation. Well, if you have a dollar, and the way inflation impacts a dollar is your dollar doesn't go down literally. What happens is the cost of what you use that dollar to purchase goes up. So I went to Jake's Burgers the other day to have a burger with my friend, and we had 2 Cokes and 2 burgers, and it was $40. A year ago, it might have been $32. So my dollar doesn't purchase as much because the cost of the good increased. If we think of, what did you pay for gasoline in the 70s? I remember as a kid when everybody was freaking out when it went above 50 cents a gallon. And now it was brutal back then. No, I wasn't driving. I was a kid. But, so your dollar could buy 2 gallons of gas. Well, now gas is, say, $4 a gallon. Your dollar can only buy a quarter of a gallon. So that's how inflation interacts with money. Now, what happens if your 401k is, say, $100,000 and it goes down in value to $90,000? So your question seems to be, where does that money go? That $10,000 that just poof, evaporated. So assuming in your 401k, we'll assume you own individual stocks. Well, those individual stocks are priced just like your gallon of gas on a daily basis. And there are people that are buying stocks and selling stocks, and then you have millions of players that are bidding on the buy side and the sell side, and they're constantly making a bid. Hey, I'll buy that from you for, $1. And they say, well, I'll sell it to you for $1.25. And then through the aggregate of people offering bids and offers, they come to a price. And that actually happens in microseconds nowadays. Just like if you were to buy land, if I'm asking $100,000 for a plot of land and you come in and you offer me $90,000, I'm going to say yes to your $90,000. I'm going to say no, or we meet somewhere in the middle. Well, that interaction of buyers and sellers is happening at millennial speed. So when your value of your stock portfolio goes down by 10,000, what's happening is the buyers are winning in the market. They're bidding lower, and the sellers feel like they have to come down in that negotiation process. And then that money actually ends up going to other assets. It could go to money markets. It could go to consumption, all sorts of things. So hopefully that gives you some clarity. It's basically a bidding war and negotiation on what the value of things. It's just happening at such a fast pace.
Our next question is from Julie, and she wants to know about the 4% rule. She says, I have a question regarding the 4% rule specific to withdrawing funds for retirement. Do you know if the scenarios around the 4% rule assume that dividends are being reinvested or are they being paid out? I don't believe I've ever heard about dividends specifically when discussing the 4% rule, so I'd love some clarification on what happens to them. If the 4% study assumes distribution of the dividends as part of the overall 4%, that's not really clear. Thank you for all you do.
Yeah, great question, Julie. I'm not a big believer in the 4% rule as a strategy for taking money out of retirement accounts. It's a good rule of thumb, though. I do agree with that. If I recall, and I'm going to say I got a 90% confidence on this answer because I didn't go back and look at the study, but I understand how most of these studies are done, is that it's assuming that it's reinvesting dividends on an annual basis. When you look at a portfolio return, say you look at the return of the S&P 500, it's including the dividends within that portfolio on a return. So that's generally the assumption that dividends are being used. And when you look at a 4% study, it's assuming you're invested in stocks, and the return that they're assuming for stocks includes the dividends. And then it's saying, how much can I sell of that portfolio on an annual basis? And generally, when you're looking at long-term returns for stocks, it's assuming that it's accumulating and reinvesting those dividends, which isn't actually the case, by the way, most times. So my answer is 90% confidence. It is assuming that those dividends are getting reinvested, because it's just trying to figure out how much could I sell every year. And the 4% range is, at least the studies that people cite most often say, are about the percentage. I'm trying to keep any soapbox or pontification out.
The soapbox
we've had a big one.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you are unfamiliar with the 4% rule, we actually have done a previous podcast series on it. And so we'll pop that link in Six Shot Saturday also. All right. Our next question from Daniel. I am currently serving active duty in the United States Marine Corps and invest 15% in the TSP. Do you think I should invest more than 15% or stick with it?
Hey, Daniel, I don't know. It depends. It's always, a lot of times that's the answer to these questions, right? Because I don't know enough of your situation. But here's how I think you can think about it. I think 15% is a great place to be. I'm encouraging, my son does 15%. My daughter's not quite there yet, but I got her started in her 401k, or she got started after my pinging. And then I'm going to encourage her to work up to the 15%. So I think you're doing awesome there. And some of this depends on how old you are and your cash flow situation. So number one, you got enough money to pay your bills. You're in the Marines. You probably don't have a lot of normal monthly expenses. Two, do you have an emergency fund? So if life happens to you, you have some financial cushion. And then three, are you saving and do you have some reserves for some upcoming expenses that you might have? Maybe at some point you're going to need to buy a home because you don't have a home currently because you're deployed, or you're going to buy a car, or you have other expenses that you're focused on building some cash for. Now is the time to do that so you don't have to go in debt or sell something when that comes due in the next year or two. So we're building a hierarchy here of what you want to hit first from a target standpoint. From there, you want to include, do you have debt that you need to pay off? It could be a car loan. It could be a student loan. It could be consumer loan. I might even elevate that about saving money for what you want to buy, because those are good places to go. Because if you get those paid off, then you'll have the proverbial snowball. You'll have better cash flow in order to save more later on. Once we get through that hierarchy, am I saying that correctly? It sounds weird.
Hierarchy.
Okay. Daniel, then you could look
some vowels out.
Then you could look at increasing your contribution to your TSP. But I would think of a target list in that order. I think you're already at a great baseline that you're saving 15%. Now think through those targets, and then you can go back and increase your TSP.
So I laughed when I got this question because we have never been asked this, as far as I know, in all of our time on the podcast. But Elaine, I think is how she would pronounce this, wrote in, stupid question. At the end of each podcast, Roger reads, all indices are unmanaged and cannot be invested into directly. What does that mean? I've never heard him mention any index, so why a disclaimer about indices? Just curious.
It's a good question. So, well, I mentioned the S&P 500, the show. That is an index, Eileen. And so why do I say that? Why do we have that disclaimer? One is obviously it's legalese. We got to have that. Lots of investments have different risk factors, and we definitely don't recommend anything to you. Why? Because we don't know you. So an index is a model that someone creates to mirror what a particular segment of the market. So let's use the S&P 500 index. If I were to say index, I should, then that's the complete sentence or the complete phrase. So Standard & Poor's is a research firm that creates indexes, and they created a mathematical model of, hey, these 500 companies constituted in these percentages represent a broad equity market exposure. And they actually have a committee at S&P where every year they review their mathematical model and they move certain companies into the index and move certain companies out of the index. And so they choose the companies, and then they have a mathematical model, which is a market cap weighted model, which says if I'm going to bring in Coca-Cola, which is already in there, how much of Coca-Cola constitutes the portfolio? Because the way the S&P 500 index is structured is it's not an equal percentage of all 500 companies. The largest companies have the largest influence. So Coke might be 6% of the portfolio or 4% of the portfolio. It's not just divided by 500. That's neither here nor there for your question, Eileen. The point is that these are mathematical models that somebody comes up with and manages over time. And so if you buy the standard in, the S&P 500 ETF, exchange traded fund, or the open-end fund, you're not actually buying the index because you can't buy the index because it's just this model that somebody maintains. What that ETF or mutual fund is doing is they are using that model and mimicking that model, meaning that they're trying to match it as close as possible. And if you look at an index fund, a Vanguard S&P 500 index fund, it will actually have a tracking error statistic that says how closely it manages to what the actual mathematical model says. So you actually can't invest in an index directly. So that's why we say that, because the lawyers tell us we need to.
I love that she asked about that, though, because it's really easy to just dismiss that kind of stuff and be like, well, legalese.
And she listened to the end, all the way to the end. Yes.
All the way to the end.
Awesome. All right. With that, let's go set a smart sprint.
On your marks, get set.
And Roth set a little baby step we can do in the next 7 days to not just rock retirement, but rock life. So in the next 7 days, when you're walking down the street in your neighborhood, when you are,
An includer?
Yes.
Are we being includers this week?
Let's be an includer. Whether maybe you're at a party. Parties are coming up. We're getting closer to festive seasons. Make an effort just to say hello to someone that you don't know that maybe showed up by themselves and bring them into the conversation. Now we're at that awkward part where I never really figured out what to say at this little close here, Nicole. Should we have something that we come up with, or just
like consistently that we should say? Once upon a time, you were going to share feedback here at the end. I don't know why we decided why we didn't keep that up.
The feedback that I get that is front of mind, and I don't know if I listened to it today, is there's a review on iTunes that says I ramble a lot. And I don't want to do that, so I try not to. Maybe I had a little soapbox here and there, but sometimes it's helpful. So that's the feedback that is top of mind.
There's also a lot of positive feedback in those reviews. King of Retirement podcasts.
As one of them, yes. And I appreciate that. And I appreciate that you came back on the show. I'm going to get a lot of people that are happy because you get asked for a lot.
Oh, thanks. It was good to be back.
The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance reference is historical and does not guarantee future results. All indices are unmanaged and cannot be invested in directly. Make sure you consult your legal, tax, or financial advisor before making any decisions.